So welcome to It's Not All About the Numbers, the leadership podcast that doesn't just focus on the bottom line. Hi, my name is Chris, and that is Mike. Sorry for the pregnant pause. And this week's co-host is Mark Proctor. I'm just going to throw it out there. Now, Mark Proctor is not here today, but this is a special that we're doing where Mike and I are basically going to say who our favorite episode co-host was and the reasons why. And I've gone back through, all close to 40 odd episodes now, and I've loved every single one, just to be clear. But Mark stands out to me, and I'm going to sort of dig into why.
So tell me why. So why does Mark stand out for you?
Very well set up.
Yeah, thanks.
So, well, first of all, Mark is the one you might remember. I feel like this is the Friends episode title, but it's the one with the Excel expert. Now, Mark is someone who worked in accounting and finance. He became a bit of an expert in Excel. He then started to kind of automate his own work, so much so that he pretty much replaced himself with the work that he was doing in Excel. And the thing that I love about Mark is that he's very pro Excel, but he also understands the real world, and he understands the practicalities about people using it. And he's not just pushing the message, learn Excel with me, and here are all my credentials. And he is very, very well qualified to do this work. He, as I said, he's got a career already, and then he moved into Excel training, and he's what Microsoft call a most valuable player, MVP, for that product. So he's globally recognized in the small community of people that they have at Microsoft as someone who knows everything and anything about Excel. But what I think I really like about Mark is that real practicality about how we adopt things. He understands that not everyone's got a huge amount of time to invest in learning these tools. So he tries to make it really practical. He's built a community on the side, which I totally respect as a community builder. He's done some great YouTube videos, which I believe you got a little addicted to for a while, about how to use certain formulas and new features within it. And I think overall, he's very, very authentic. He put in an application for the Digital Finance Function Awards, the Jennies, which he didn't win, but being shortlisted was a huge achievement. And I think that's it. I just think he's a really interesting guy to talk to. He's passionate. All the things we talked about as being a great leader.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation with Mark. I think I almost got addicted to his videos, but then I got distracted by something that we talk about in the podcast, which is the eSports version of competitive Excel. And I think that if for no other reason than that, you ought to listen to this next bit of the special.
Yeah, well, that is a great segue. So enjoy this chat. It's a meandering chat, but very much all about the world of Excel. So enjoy, and we will catch up next week with Mike's favorite. Take care. So welcome to It's Not All About the Numbers, the leadership podcast that doesn't just focus on the bottom line. Hi, my name is Chris, and that is Mike.
Hi, everyone.
And today's co-host is Mark Proctor of ExcelOffTheGrid.com. He is a Microsoft MVP and YouTuber. Welcome, Mark. Welcome, Mark. He's looking very earnest. Well, he didn't like what we were saying, did he?
No.
It's never happened before. I thought that was such good energy as well. Is he there? Is he there?
I'm back.
I'm
back. I mean, we're starting in 3, 2, and then my Wi-Fi drops out.
Brilliant. It's the AI listening. It thought it was a countdown to the end of the week.
Who knows? I thought you did a really good pause there. 3, 2.
Anyway, we'll just include that in the edit and keep going. But as I was saying, co-host Mark Proctor, Excel off the grid, Microsoft MVP. I did just have a chance to explain to Mike what an MVP was, by the way, and YouTuber. So, welcome, Mark.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Yes, seems to be difficult being here, so I hope you stay on. But first of all, how was? I thought it was something that I said. How was everybody's week? Mike, over to you first.
Well, I've had a week knee deep in data licensing this week. So one of the projects I'm working on involves sharing data between different government organizations, which means reading complex legal agreements relating to sharing of data and trying to navigate what people are doing with data and what the license says. So yeah, it's been quite tiring getting my brain around that. So that was like the work side of it. This morning, my dogs were motivating me to get out and get some fresh air. So I have had fresh air. I do feel a bit more invigorated than I did at sort of 7 a.m. this morning after a week of data licensing.
And I've got to say this. So just before we came on, we had a little chat, and I saw Mike's calendar on the screen, and it said, "Speaking of dogs, brush dogs' teeth." So, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Is that a weekly thing or what?
So you're supposed to brush your dog's teeth like every day, every other day, but I find that's just a little bit too much. So that's my reminder to once a week to do it, because otherwise, because they don't chew enough stuff, the food that they're prepped is not bones and they don't crunch it up. Yeah. So yeah, they get quite a lot of plaque on their teeth. So yeah, brushing the dog's teeth.
I think you've been reading the wrong advice, Mike. You know, that sounds
I've heard similar things, but we just give our dog dental chews so that it's apparently they're meant to clean their teeth at the same time.
Yeah, meant to. Yeah.
Meant to. So, Mark, is that on your calendar list for this week?
It's not. It's never been on my calendar, to be honest. Although, from what Mike's just said, I think I've got to put it on straight away, obviously, because I'm clearly a very bad dog owner.
It's now a known. It's a known unknown rather than an unknown unknown now.
Yeah. Well, yes. I'm sorry, my dog doesn't understand, and I'm not going to make that a thing. So sorry about that. But then, maybe you're laughing with all those dental bills that I'm going to get in a few years' time. But what else have you been up to, Mark? How was the rest of the week without a dog?
For me, I've been in Bulgaria this week. I was at a Excel conference in Bulgaria. Excel Days.
Excel Days. DAZE or
no, just DAYS.
Right. Okay. Well, the Bulgarian wine's quite good, I hear. So you never know.
Yeah, we had some of that. That's nice.
Yeah. And on the personal side, what did you do when you weren't doing that conference?
Well,
how do you re-energize?
So how do I re-energize? It's a difficult question. To be honest, I view myself as quite a level person. You go through all those like personality tests and they talk about 80-20 and how you need to prioritize the time when you're on and go for it. And I'm like, I'm just level most of the time. So it's like just life just happens. And I don't have any, people talk about I do this and do that, and I just keep going. I don't have any big energy issues.
So I'm gonna probe on that. So in the evenings when you've had a full day in Bulgaria on Excel days, and I'm talking about Excel, do you go back to your hotel room and get your computer out and start doing Excel, or do you do something else? What's the other thing?
So, because I was one of the speakers, so they took us out for dinner every evening. There was a full schedule of stuff to do. So. Unfortunately, the chances of getting my laptop out and working on some spreadsheets wasn't as high as I might like.
This sounds like a terrible week for you, in fact.
So I'm really level. I'm happy with a spreadsheet. I'm happy without. I mean, I'm flexible.
You know what? I think I need a bit of Mark in me. Hang on. It's taking a turn. Because I definitely haven't had a week like that, and I'm not as level as yourself. So maybe you need to write a book on your approach to life, Mark, because the Proctor way. Because I was exhausted yesterday. I had a couple of NED meetings, and I hosted a talk on Tuesday all about Gen AI versus automation, and I think we give a lot of energy when we sort of have these meetings, and there's a lot of people around you. And even though I'm sort of an extrovert and I quite enjoy being in that environment, you still have to be sort of on your game. And then the thing that really topped it off, which broke my energy level, was I was staying away. So I did not sleep in this bed. I don't know what it was about this hotel bed. I just couldn't get comfortable in it. And I woke up at about 5 o'clock, and then the previous day's guest had set their alarm for 5:30, which woke me up again. So then I was like, right, I've just had enough. So I got up at 5:30 and started my day after about 3 hours broken sleep. But yeah, that was me. So I was frazzled yesterday, not so much today, but I feel that, Mark, you would have handled that so much better than me. So you're going to have to.
The key is just to be grumpy all the time, no matter what. And then nobody can tell any different.
Yeah, it's like that. What is it? It's consistently wrong is better than being right and wrong all the time, or something. I don't know. Is that a phrase? Anyway, moving on. I love the fact that you went to an Excel days in Bulgaria, because we noticed something this week, Mike and I, while digging around, which needs some explaining, I think. We stumbled across something called Excel as a sport, as an eSport. And I dug a little bit further, and it's even got a World Cup that has been on ESPN.
Yep.
What the hell is this all about? First of all, do you know about it? And I assume you do. But is Excel a sport? Should it ever be a sport? Is this what you are doing at the weekends, being so chilled out?
So effectively, it came out of the financial modeling side of Excel, where it's all about speed and shortcuts and how fast can you create your financial model. And so it started off with the Financial Modeling World Cup, where people would try and build the best financial models in whatever given time and scenarios. And then it's kind of grown from there. And now it is the Excel World Championships. I think there's both. I think there's still definitely a financial modeling element, but then there's a more general Excel element. And it's all about the speed of being able to solve problems. I mean, it's just like solving any given problem. You're given a problem, and you just have to solve it as quickly as you can using Excel. Is it?
But this is like, I don't want to, take the mick out of it. But this is on ESPN, right? This is. I'm just trying to get my head around the concept, right? Because is it watchable, or is it just there are a lot of followers who do it, and therefore there is an audience on ESPN? The final last year was in Las Vegas. People flew in from all over the world to watch the Excel World Championships. Is it watchable? I think, in terms of a sport, sport in double quotes. I think it. I mean, it's fun, right? If you're watching it, it's fun, but it's quite difficult to understand. At least I find it difficult to understand quite what's going on. If you're playing, if you watch golf on TV, it goes across to whatever hole and it says who they are and what hole they're on, and then when they flip back to somebody else, it's not a problem. They're just on a different hole, but everyone's doing the same thing 18 times. When it comes to Excel as an eSport, in terms of is it watchable, because different people are at different parts of the challenges and different people are trying to complete different bits, trying to understand how far along somebody is and what they're doing can be quite difficult. But you see people's screens as they put out these crazy formulas that you don't even know you don't even understand how they even, is that even a formula that works? And they press return, and then it spills out a number, and you're like, who knows if it's right? And then they copy and paste it into the answer sheet, and they get points, and everyone cheers.
It's quite funny. So before we spoke, so I've looked on your website and looked at a couple of the YouTube videos that you've done where you explain how to do something in Excel, and they're very good, by the way. I got hooked. I was watching it thinking, well, that's interesting. Where might I do that? And then I watched the eSports, and it's almost like all of your videos stitched together, played at 5 times speed, but with no commentary, with no explanation of what's going on. It's almost like watching coders code.
Yeah, and I mean, in all honesty, there is no way I could ever compete in that because I'm just not fast enough, and that's the truth. And it's also if speed is the most important thing, then that's great. If you've only, in the real world, if you've only got to complete something once, then speed is reasonably important, because if you're only going to complete it once. But in terms of, Chris, your world, in terms of automation, if you're not going to complete it once, then let's build it right the first time. So it's definitely
absolutely
it's a niche that exists for speed and entertainment, but in the real world, you might pick up some skills, but that isn't how you'd apply it in the real world.
There's something else around the whole eSports thing anyway, and I think that people using computers to compete in what they're calling sport, I think you did air quotes earlier.
Yep.
I think is a question. But it also, literally this week, the World Snooker Championship has just started. And if you think about how that must have originated back in India, with people having their dinner and then rolling balls around on a table, for them to then think that that'd end up being a multi-million-pound participatory sport across the world.
Are you knocking snooker as a sport?
No, the opposite. It's the opposite. I love it.
As that is a staple, I think, of the bank holiday weekend, isn't it?
Exactly.
The grand final at the Crucible. I would compare this more to chess. I think if there was like a chess tournament playing, and there was a whole field of people playing, but it was difficult to tell where they were if you were sort of moving between each chessboards, and you kind of knew the players had strengths, but you couldn't really understand where they were during the game. I think it'd be more like that. And that I don't think that has ever become an esport. So
when Excel was on ESPN, they had their what is it? Is it dodgeball, where they mentioned, was it ESPN 8, the Ocho, which apparently shows dodgeball, and this is kind of where it's come from, all these odd sports. But when they show it on ESPN, it's on the same, like straight after it might be, I think there's something called slippery stair climbing, which is where which is another sport. It is literally people climbing slippery stairs. I mean, it's not it's not a clever name. It's exactly what it says.
This is one click away from OnlyFans. This is like some really niche content that people are producing there. But anyway, I
think that's my afternoon gone. Slippery stairs. I'm there after this.
It's the thing. It's the thing. You find it on YouTube. You'll be hooked.
Yeah.
Anyway, shall we try and get this back on track? Because that's definitely gone down a bit of a slippery rabbit hole. There is a link here, though, right? Obviously it's all about Excel, but you made a really good point there around the real world versus the entertainment world. And, I sometimes wonder, tell us a little bit more about what you do, because there was a very relevant conversation that we had on Tuesday about Gen AI versus automation and all that good stuff. And there was a bit of a sense that there was this sort of group of people starting to emerge who were great at fixing stuff. They were super fixers or something. But we could potentially be, creating, replacing one problem with another, because you then start to rely on the fixers rather than trying to fix the entire problem. You're working on the symptoms rather than the cause. So, but tell us a little bit more about what you do and whether you sort of recognize the role of that super fixer.
My main element in terms of consultancy, or in terms of training and our online programs and the YouTube channel and blog posts and everything else, the key thing that we try and teach and get across is it's about how you set things up the right way, how you think about and structure data. So therefore, rather than thinking about I'm working in a spreadsheet, I'm working with Excel, how do we work with data and then use Excel in that piece? So in terms of the idea of automation and and a super fixer, I would say that Excel is a great tool for automating lots of processes and lots of methods. And whether that is a stepping stone to something else, or whether that is an end in itself, probably depends a lot on what organization you work for, what funding they've got, and what they're willing to invest in. My main ethos has always been, don't try and do something, or in Excel, don't try and build a process that you can't do manually. So, for example, when I came through the airport, back to the airport yesterday, all the e-gates were down. So therefore, everyone was going through manual passport control.
Ouch.
Yeah, it took a while, but they've got a solution, right? That's their manual process.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in Excel, if you automate something, you almost want to be in that same position. I've got a system where I can automate things and I can do things fast, but if everything falls apart, there is a manual process that we can work through. What you don't want ever is the case that Excel is your entire system, and that your entire system is an automation built in Excel, because when that goes down, suddenly it's like we've got nowhere to go. So I think that's a key element around how we think about and use Excel. Because if you want to build it if you want to use it like an application, in that scenario, you need proper support, proper maintenance, companies that understand the code base and can work with it. So you're going to end up working probably with a third party, rather than allowing people in-house to do whatever they're going to do. But if you want to build an automation process, you can allow people in-house to do that and build out their own steps and what they do, because ultimately you're automating manual steps. And I think that's the key difference between how you end up with a super fixer and a super big problem, because a super fixer will give you a faster process that could be done in the same way manually, but a super problem is a application or a process that can only work using that way. Did that make any sense?
It did make a lot of sense. And I wanted to dig into something you said at the start of what you were saying there, because it really resonated with me, which was around, so Excel, I'm going to paraphrase. Excel is a tool, it's a solution, it's a technology, but actually underpinning that, you have to have the right foundations in place. Yep. So having good data, or the right data in place as a foundation, and what you just said about e-gates and processes, having the right processes in place that you understand as a foundation, are both key before you get to the Excel stage or the tool stage. And that really resonated quite strongly with quite a lot of the work that I do, where it's really easy to get developers in to build stuff. But actually, quite often, and certainly on some of the things I've worked on recently, the tools are built, the whizzy apps are built, but the data's not there. So actually, you're going to come up against a crunch, your big problem. You're going to come up against that super problem when you finally realise that the data's not there.
Yeah, I mean, the structure is the most important piece. So often, when we think about Excel spreadsheets, you've got cells that are vertical and horizontal. And people often then think that it's almost like a free form area that you can use however you like. But the issue is that what people do is they'll download something from, let's say someone's doing some reporting on accounts payable, it's some ad hoc reporting. They'll download a report from their accounting system, they'll copy and paste it into Excel. And at that point, they've already removed their best opportunity for cleaning everything up and for bringing in data that's in a good shape. Because, it's what you do, you download, you copy and paste into Excel. The problem is that once you've copied and pasted into Excel, whatever you've got, there's no way that it's in the right format. It never is in the right format, because what's come out of your accounting system is a report, it's information. So therefore it's structured as information, it's categorized, it's grouped, it's ordered, it's for an intended purpose. As soon as you want to use that for something else, if you want to use that input or that information, you have to reshape it back into a data layout that then gives you the flexibility to build whatever report you want out the back of it. So which is why in Excel, there's tools like Power Query, which you'll hear the proponents of Power Query will talk to you about it all day long. So it's a tool inside Excel which connects to whatever input you've got. Whether it can connect to your accounting system, it can connect to spreadsheets, it's got APIs, it can connect to the web, and it will pull information in. You then clean it up in Power Query and then push it into Excel in a data layout. And then next month, when you come along, you click refresh, it does the same thing all over again. The next month, click refresh, it does the same thing all over again. And all of that is completely traceable in this tool called Power Query that's now in Power BI and a whole host of other Microsoft tools. So it's their tool for how you connect to something and then convert it into the thing that you need it to be.
And you're right. I've heard a lot about that in our world. And, I think it's like as soon as people see it, it's like a magical solution. Like this is like what I've been waiting for. Because they're also used to that Excel environment, they're happy to sort of build that out rather than go and look for something else. So there's definitely something psychological, I think, about that move as well. But just going back a little bit. So, I said at the start, you're a Microsoft MVP, and we've obviously talked a lot about the products and things like that. But, where did you start and how did you, become this, advocate for one particular product and then get that title? Because I've seen the MVPs come together. It looks like a fantastic community. So I can totally understand why you're there now. But how did you get to that point?
And
it might be worth explaining what an MVP is.
So it depends on who you speak to. There's Ian Pay from the ICAW, who runs their Excel community. He said to me, you're a Microsoft MVP. That effectively means you're a salesman that doesn't get paid for them. And I think you might have a fair point. So
an advocate, let's say. Yeah.
An MVP is somebody who is recognized by Microsoft as being a community leader, is the term that they use, or someone that shares knowledge that helps others to use their products. That's probably the best way of describing it. How did I become an MVP? Around 2015, I got a new job working for a new company. I joined there, and month ends, forecasts, all of those were probably 9, 10, 11 o'clock finishes every single day.
So you're working in accounting finance? Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I had effectively an FP&A role at that point.
I do remember in my research that I saw a really interesting title, which I didn't quite understand, which was head of yeast.
Head of yeast manufacturing and technology finance.
Right. Okay.
I think there's
a lot in there. There's a lot in there.
We can unpack that in a minute.
Was this for a brewery or?
So a yeast company. So they sold yeast. They did brewer's yeast. They did wines, spirits, bread.
Right.
Yeah, it was. We will go slightly off topic now, but there's a lot of like the yeast that you use in terms of sour bread or sourdough, and the yeast that gets used in brewing and whiskey and all those things. The flavor matters. So therefore, there's a lot of
different.
There's a lot of research and like how does yeast respond to in different environments and what flavors does that give? So there is a huge amount of research that goes into yeast.
Well, in previous podcasts, we've identified that knowing the business makes you a much better business leader, or even finance leader, and you're just showing that you do know the business, which would make you a very good FP&A person because you could talk to the different types of yeast in there. Anyway, we definitely put a rabbit hole there. So
around 2015, I started working for this company, and they were late finishes every day. I had maybe a 1 month old at home and a 3-year-old, and to be honest, I didn't even see daylight, let alone see them. And it was just a case of I decided something needs to change. The tools that we had were Excel. They're the tools that I had as an individual. So it was a case of working through that. Originally, it was all around macros and VBA because that was all I knew. That was all anyone was telling us. And around 2015, that was kind of the technologies that we had. VBA wasn't really not VBA. Power Query hadn't really taken off and started at that point, although it was around. And then through that, we managed to squeeze down our month end and our forecasts. Like I suppose I probably saved 20 hours, like 3 days off our month end. It's a 6 day turnaround, so maybe 3 days or so, and that was just by using Excel better. And then that sparked my interest in terms of, if I can save this time, what else can we do? That's when I started Excel off the grid. It was about trying to share the techniques and methods that I'd used, and then over time that just developed further and further until and as I went deeper into that, you find more and more technologies that you don't know about, and suddenly it's like the stuff that I did originally to save those 20 hours, it was a drop in the ocean compared to what's available. So I then moved between a few other roles, a few other jobs, and then in 2021 I decided that I was going to set up on my own as a business to help people to do some things and try and save time off their month ends and forecast cycles. You know, we've got members in our community who are saving hundreds of hours for themselves and their team by implementing these technologies, and they're the tools that they've already got, which is, it's just about using them properly and thinking about the frameworks and the structures, and how it's not just about using Excel. How do you solve a problem? What are the stages you need to go through? And even though someone might say, oh, but if you can leave out that stage, it's inefficient. Like, yeah, but if we go through these 7 stages, and these 7 stages always give us a solid answer, let's not skip out on a stage just because we might save 30 seconds. Let's get this thing so it's so repeatable that we can do the same things over and over again, use the same frameworks, the same methods. And I think, you know, as we've discussed before, Chris, one of the things is, if you've got a system, if you've got an application that your business uses, then use it. Okay, you use it properly and use it well. Yeah. If your business doesn't have that, or you're the only person that does something, or even a team of 3, and it's not worth investing in that tool, then it's worth investing in those Excel skills so that you're then not wasting huge amounts of time. Just understand the frameworks and the tools and what you can do, and it can free you from that month end churn or that budget and forecast cycle.
Can I just ask one clarifying question before Mike comes in? That when you say Excel, right? So I've been having an ongoing battle with a couple of people for probably 10 years now about, you know, is Excel dead and isn't Excel dead and all this sort of stuff. And I just want to be really clear on the tool. So when we say Excel, what do you mean by that? Is it a type? Is it a version? Is it any Excel? Or, you know, because the thing is, I think when I first started this debate about trying to use Excel less and use other types of products, it's not the product that it is today, right? You talk about overlaying Power Query and all this other stuff. So if you were trying to get the most value out of that product now, which Excel would you be talking about? So the Excel 2016 onwards is where things really changed. So in the early 2010, so 2010, 2013 versions of Excel, they had Power Query and something known as Power Pivot as add-ins. Around 2016, they then became natively available in that product, and so that's at that point that was kind of the pivotal moment at which Excel changed. So these tools were really, I mean, if you think about the early 2010s, it was all about big data. That they were the terms that were being thrown around, and the Excel team went, you want a product that can handle 1 billion rows? Fine, we'll give you Power Pivot. We can handle 1 billion rows. We can handle 10 billion. We can handle as many rows as you like. And so that's now in Excel. It's in the background, right? You don't see it. You've probably never interacted with it. There's just one button that if you click on it, then fires up this entire new world that you've never experienced. But when I talk about Excel, I'm talking about all of that piece
around how all those new tools fit together in terms of this big data world. And so it's often when people talk about Excel, their understanding of Excel is based around the 1997 version of Excel. I think that's when pivot tables first came out. And they talk about, we've got a VLOOKUP and we've got pivot tables. And when recruiters say, we want advanced Excel skills for this job, we need VLOOKUP and we need pivot tables. That's if you're recruiting. That's if you're recruiting for somebody in 1997.
Yeah.
Everything's moved on, but unfortunately, I think finance teams have not moved on, and there's something that I call the curse of the lowest common skill set, which is where somebody gets a new job. If they're like me, right? They get a new job. They're spending a lot of time on it, so they build themselves up. They get these skills. The job ceases to be a challenge to them anymore. They move on. Someone else comes along who has advanced Excel skills. I also put that in air quotes. Advanced Excel skills. They come along. They get that job. But unfortunately, they haven't actually got that same level of skills. They haven't built themselves up. They haven't developed that understanding of those new tools. So what happens is that things then revert back to that VLOOKUP and pivot table world. And so therefore, finance keeps returning back to that lowest common skill set rather than pushing through and really grasping the technologies that are available.
It's really interesting because when you came in there, Chris, and asked your question, you kind of asked the same question that I had in my mind, but I was going to frame it slightly differently. So when I first met Chris a few years back now, I would have said, Chris, you were pretty negative on Excel, pretty down on it. In terms of as a thing, just in general, you kind of hinted at it in your point, but I think what you've just described there, Mark, which is really interesting, is it's that understanding of what the tool actually is the key bit, and actually you've described now Excel as a thing which is completely different to what my understanding was, and I think Excel used badly, like any tool used badly, is a bad tool, but used well, it's great, is kind of what I'm getting from this conversation. And I think that's the road that, Chris, you've been on from this kind of like Excel naysayer. I think you're now coming round to it being a much more positive thing. I'm putting words in your mouth.
Yeah,
just to see if I get a reaction.
You definitely are. Do not do that. No, so let me explain where I was with it, and we'll move on after this. But so I actually think I've got exactly the same view as you, Mark. But I was coming at it as, look, you're either going to learn to use this tool or you're going to learn to use another tool, which may be a narrower use case. So it's easier for you to learn, right? Because as you said, the strength of Excel is its ubiquity, but that's also, like being at the buffet, you're just going to use it for, breakfast, lunch and dinner. And it's like, but actually, if I just want to do one thing really well, maybe it's easy to go and learn another tool. So I think, I actually agree with you. People should be using the right tool for the right job, but also learning it and understanding what that capability is. And my argument was always pre-2016, because the tool changed. So when I was saying, Excel is dead, what I'm actually saying now is Excel thinking should be dead.
And I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, but because the product has moved on. But the reality is, when people are comfortable with an Excel environment, they're probably happier adding to the ribbon, the functionality within Excel rather than going to learn another product. But as I come from a change and transformation background, I do also think there's an argument for actually saying, look, okay, let's learn something completely new that is quite narrow for you to understand and learn for a single use case. So you go to that tool for planning, you go to that tool for, process automation. And, so it's complicated, but I actually think we're more aligned than challenging Excel.
Well, I think ultimately you've got it's just about calculation, but calculation on rails, right? And it just depends what those rails are. So if you go to a planning tool, they're performing calculations on data, and they've got their framework and their method. Therefore, they're giving you a set of rails that you work down. If you're going to some other tool, it's got a set of rails that you're working down, their way of thinking, they're working. Excel's just got a lot of possible rails that you could build. So it's quite a wide tool for calculation. It means that you have to build your own rails, which also means if you don't have that understanding of how data works and how to structure things, you end up in a very time-consuming place with just a lot of manual work. But you can build your own rails, or you go to a separate tool that has all those rails already built. It's which is why I'm not against third-party tools, which is why I don't say Excel is the solution for everything, because it isn't. You've got to use the best tools that you can, and some tools they're just not worth investing in because there's one person who deals with that thing. So there's always that wider calculation available inside Excel.
That's great. I just want to sort of like tangent round a little bit, because you clearly know what you're talking about, right? And you've got this kind of passion for the tool set and passion for how it's applied and understanding. And just want to sort of go back to the start of this sort of bit of questioning around what do you think it is about you, and what do you bring when you go into, like, you and your company go into an organization around the transformational piece of what the tools can bring? How do you approach that?
So, I mean, do you mean transfer? Because ultimately my story is that I went from never being at home to being at home, right? Excel is, for me, is a tool that lets finance people spend time with those people that they love or doing what they love, right? It's about, if they can get it right, it lets them go home on time. It lets them, spend time with their kids. That's my goal. If it's Excel, if it's Power BI, if it's whatever it is, I almost don't mind, right? And it's about how that fits into your existing processes. So for me, transformation is about people transforming their lives rather than about, if you want to come top down, right? Excel really shouldn't really be in that discussion. If you want to come top down, let's talk strategically about the best tools you can use. But when you're coming bottom up, and it's about people in your organization being able to take control of that environment, take control of those things themselves, that's the kind of transformations that are available. But it's all about life transformations rather than about organizational transformations.
That's fantastic. I mean, you answered the question I was trying to ask brilliantly. So it's almost like that the payback is not just obviously getting work and doing work. It's actually that human element to it, which I think is it's amazing, because I think Chris and I often talk on the podcast about people first, and it's all about the people in transformation. And what you've just described there is that motivation around people. I love it.
It's 100% about people, because if it's not changing people's lives, then we might as well just go back to Excel 97,
which a lot of the population are using. But so I don't know about going back to it. But no, Mark, I feel your passion. Obviously, we've met a few times before this, and I think you're a great advocate for, just better practice in business. It's not. I know we sort of bill you as an Excel person, but actually, you're much more than that.
To be honest, your handle Excel off the grid bills you as an Excel person.
Yeah. That's good. There's no suing on that liable, is there? But it's normally at this point that we ask a question, and if you do want to send a question in, then it's podcast@generationcfo.com, or just reach out directly to myself and Mike. And this week, this question actually came up in a planning session that we had for a couple of events that we've got coming up. And I thought I'd take the opportunity to ask you about it, Mark, as well, because there's no getting away from it. Microsoft has a lot of products. One of the ones that has taken over the world, like along with Gen AI conversation, is Copilot. And I don't know whether you're a Copilot expert or not. This really isn't about the product. But the question is Copilot the gateway drug to wholesale automation? And how is it used in finance stroke business? And I think it's a really interesting thing because arguably technology is quite difficult to engage with. We laughed and we joked about the Excel World Cup on ESPN and all the rest of it, but there is an underlying thing there. If you actually look over someone's shoulder when they're doing stuff, it's difficult to pick up. But Copilot and Gen AI is very real. People get it immediately. So, and we're sort of the question I think was phrased as gateway drug because it's a bit like careful what you wish for. It might happen, and it might open up people's eyes to sort of getting involved. But going back to that super fixer role, do we end up just putting sticky plasters on everything because AI is at everybody's fingertips? What do you think of that whole step forward or leap forward as it really is?
So there's one thing better than artificial intelligence, and that's actual intelligence. And that's what I think we need to apply in lots of these scenarios. So in terms of Gen AI, so I've used Copilot in Word. It's fantastic, right? It's integrated into the product. But what role is it performing there? It's generative. It's performing a creative task. That means I can read that, and I can, because I'm an English speaker, I can read that and I can understand the sentences and I can change it and I can work with it. When we think about Gen AI in terms of technology, the issue is that we get to a place where people will happily generate code without understanding what it does, which if ChatGPT generated text that I didn't understand, would I put it into an email and send it? No, I wouldn't, because you don't know what it means, right? So, but yeah, people have to use code without understanding what it means. So I think there's an issue, and there is an issue there about that super fixer role, that it becomes easier to become a super fixer. But in my mind, it almost creates a house of cards, which nobody really understands how that works. And that's always been a problem, right? That has been a problem with VBA and recording macros and all that other stuff. People talk about key man dependency and all of this. Yeah, that is a real thing, which is why I say it's about not building processes that you're 100% reliant on, but you're automating something you've got a manual way to do. So when you end up with that AI world and people are writing code, I think that's a big problem. If it helps people to do something that they already know how to do faster, 100%. But otherwise, if I generated some text from ChatGPT or Copilot and I didn't understand what the words were, what the sentences were, would I send that to a client? No. Yeah. And I think you've got to apply the same principle to anything that comes out. If you don't understand it, you're creating a huge risk.
It almost sounds, I think that gateway drug is a bit controversial, but it is sort of pointing to that, short-term high, long-term low. And in the wrong hands, might not be great to use. Sorry, Mike.
No, it's fine. I was just sort of thinking through like my workflows and the AI. And actually, I'm quite glad at the moment that some of these things are still paid for add-ons, because I think that puts people off actually just using them straight away, and they're just being part of that workflow. My concern more will be when these things are just there, and they're like Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever is just there and it's plugged in already. You don't even know it's doing stuff in the background and it's just running. That's when I think it carries on building that house of cards, and the danger of that happening is increasing.
Yeah. Or you sort of, I don't know. Some people have positively phrased sort of Copilot as an assistant. Treat it as a sort of intern. Like you can ask questions, but don't assume
it was phrased as Clippy Plus, wasn't it, to begin with? It was
Wow, that's
brought
going
back
back.
Clippy.
That's going back.
I think that the naming there is for what Microsoft done is quite important. Is that it's Copilot, it's not autopilot.
Yes,
and that's very much, from my view, that's very much the way that they're viewing it. It is a tool to help you, and that is, it's still on your back,
and not pilot, as well,
Yes.
right? To your point, if I just ask it to produce some code that I don't understand, and then, or even, ask it some advice, and then just take that advice. I think, we've had this discussion many times before. It's almost like, doesn't matter what it is in the sort of data science world, and this is an output almost from a data science world, right? It's always wrong. It's just, how right is it? You start thinking more scientifically about this. It's just like, it's always wrong. Are you happy to take that advice? Are you happy to? But I think there are some really strong use cases in the language world, and people are sort of mapping that across. And I remember another MVP that I believe you know very well, Oz Desolé, who did a really good presentation using Copilot in Excel, where he he was just sort of, he's an evangelist for the product, but he was just like, I don't know whether this is right, or the formula that it's produced.
I mean, I was with Oz in Bulgaria, and he's definitely not an AI evangelist.
Right.
So he's like, what is anything kind of smoke and mirrors, any magic. He's like, his view, and I think he's right. You need to understand what's going on, and it's about, if you don't understand what's going on, then you're just building up trouble.
Yeah. Mike, I know you talk a lot about magic, and people get very excited about magic.
I mean, absolutely. And people look at things. I mean, back to the data question, the data thing that I said earlier, people build the tools and expect the data to be there by magic. And it really is that. But I think that if you look at the positive of all this conversation around Gen AI and how it's been operated, is actually shining a light on stuff that was already a problem, where algorithms were making decisions and we didn't understand what those decisions were and where they were. It's now a conversation we're actually having, rather than we're just happy to trust the computer, the classic computer says no technology, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, interesting stuff. We definitely answered the question there, which is great. And if you want more of that sort of chat, we do have a couple of events coming up on the Gen CFO side on that debate. Probably more answering the second part of that question, which is, how are people trying to use it in business? Sounds like we shouldn't be, but we'll cross that bridge. But next up, we've got our good data, bad data, just to wrap up. And this is a bit of a highlight of things that we found in the media or the press or Giuseppe's newsletter, as it seems to be every week. Credit to Giuseppe again. And if you do want to send anything in on good data, bad data, then do tag us either on LinkedIn with the good data, bad data hashtag, or send something in via the email, because there's a whole world of data out there, right, Mike? And you found something interesting.
Well, I mean, again, credit to Giuseppe and his newsletter. So what this is it's basically a mapping tool created by a guy called Robin Wilson. And you can type in like the ends of British place names into a tool, and it will just show you all the points with different name. So I've done Mouth, and like Weymouth comes up, and all of the other different places with Mouth. And it's just like a fascinating little thing that you can do to see, groupings of place names that are similar. The other one I tried was Avon for rivers, and seeing how many different river Avons there are. You can tell that we're recording this on a Friday, and this was a Friday lunchtime little 5-minute time waster for me just to do all these places. But yeah, it was a great little thing.
It sounds like a great 10 minutes well spent. Actually, I just put in Cock to see all of the towns beginning and ending in Cock. There's actually thousands of them, which is pretty impressive. Anything else you should be looking up?
I'm just agog at that you went straight there, to be honest.
Well, it's part of the English language, old cock. I think it's a legit word.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on. Bad data. What have you got?
I mean, so my bad data is a really simple one, which is it's May next week. I can't believe that this year is now already month 5, and I just wanted to reflect on the fact that I'm clearly getting old. Time's going fast. I'm a bit fed up of it. I would like it to slow down just a little bit so I could enjoy it a bit more. There you go. Simple as that.
I agree. Actually, I was talking to someone in the week, and it was like, where the hell has the time gone? Mark, I don't know whether you had any New Year's resolutions, but one of my New Year's resolutions was to go open water swimming with some mates locally, and I agreed to that on the 1st of January. And I haven't done it once this year. And I all of a sudden realized, oh my God, I have been saying not this week for like 5 months. It's like, oh, mate, we're in May, or almost in May. Oh, no, we are in May. So when this goes out. So,
I mean, the key thing to think about in terms of, or that I think about in terms, we say, oh, I'm getting older, time's rushing away, is you just count time for what it is. So I'm 44, which means that if I get this right, I have said it wrong in the past, that the Earth has been around the sun 44 times since I've been born, right? And nobody cares about that. No, that's ultimately what you're counting, right? How many times has that happened? And even you don't care. It's just, we've got this measure of time, which is based on, the universe. But then really, how much time we have left is a measure of decay and all this other stuff. And, the two are only partly related. So I don't think you need to worry.
I told you it was bad data. Yes.
Yeah, it was bad data. Terrible data. It was, it reminded me of a song, a good song back in the day, Age Ain't Nothing But a Number. And I definitely have that philosophy. I have that philosophy actually for 10 years. I seem to struggle on the decades. So the 30, 40, 50 was all pretty scary. But anyway, I think that's a wrap. So Mark, thank you so much for all of your insight there and allowing us to talk about the Excel as an eSport, because I know you really didn't want to talk about that. But where can people find you if they're interested in what you do?
So my main home is exceloffthegrid.com. You can find everything there. I'm reasonably active on LinkedIn, so you can find me there and follow me, drop a comment, say hello. I'm happy to speak to anyone. If you're in the finance world, that's even better. Hopefully I can help to save you some time and you can go home on time more often.
I love that. If you're doing business development, I think your opening question should be, do you go home late once a month because of your month end? And if the answer is yes, you should be working with Mark. But yeah, it sounds great. Well, thanks again. That's it for this week. So thank you from me. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, everyone.
And remember, it's not all about the numbers.